Adaobi could not sleep that night. The billionaire's confession played over and over in her mind, leaving her restless. She had not expected such words from him, not from the man whose presence commanded silence, whose wealth made him untouchable. She had always viewed him as someone far above her world, a figure so distant that even imagining him as human seemed absurd. Yet here he was, revealing weakness, laying bare his heart in a way that unsettled her. She tossed on the small bed in her quarters, torn between fear and a strange warmth that kept tugging at her chest. Damien, in his own wing of the mansion, felt no different. He sat in the dim light of his study, staring at the glass of untouched whiskey on his desk. He had never felt so vulnerable, so open, and the weight of it scared him. Men like him were not supposed to feel this way. Men like him were supposed to remain in control, to give orders, to take whatever they wanted without hesitation. But Adaobi was not something he could simply buy or command. She carried a power he could not explain, and the thought of it shook him to his core. The following morning, their eyes met briefly in the hallway. Adaobi lowered her gaze quickly, pretending to be busy, but Damien did not miss the tension. She was avoiding him, yet he could sense her confusion. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he let her walk past, his heart heavy with questions he had no answers to.
Days passed, and the mansion seemed different. Adaobi's presence grew louder in his life, not through her words, but through the silence that followed her every move. Damien noticed everything: the careful way she avoided lingering in rooms he occupied, the nervousness in her hands whenever she served him tea, the way her laughter, once carefree, had grown restrained. She was unsettled, and so was he. One evening, during a light rainfall, Damien found her in the garden, sheltering under the veranda. She was staring at the raindrops, her thoughts far away. He approached quietly, his steps soft against the tiles. She turned when she sensed him, her eyes widening slightly before she straightened, ready to excuse herself. But he stopped her with a gentle shake of his head. "You don't have to run every time you see me," he said softly, his voice stripped of its usual authority. She hesitated, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her apron. "I don't want to overstep my boundaries, sir." "Boundaries," Damien repeated almost to himself. "That's all my life has been. Walls, rules, expectations, but you've broken them without even trying." Adaobi looked away, her heart racing. "You shouldn't say things like that to me. I'm just a maid." He stepped closer, but not too close, leaving a respectful space between them. "To the world, maybe, but to me, you are the only person who has ever made me feel alive." Her breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to remind him of the dangers, but his eyes held a sincerity that disarmed her. She had seen men lie, had heard empty promises dressed in fine words, but Damien's vulnerability was different. It was raw, unpolished, and frighteningly real. That night, Adaobi sat alone, struggling with choices she had never imagined making. She could leave the mansion, escape before things spiraled further, but where would she go? Her family depended on her, and deep inside, she could not deny the stirrings of something she dared not name. She had begun to feel for him, not as a billionaire or as her employer, but as a man flawed, broken, and human. Damien, too, wrestled with himself. Every instinct told him to take control, to claim what he wanted, but something stopped him. He realized he did not want to cage Adaobi into submission. He wanted her to choose him freely. That realization terrified him even more, because it meant his fate was no longer in his hands. The mansion became a silent witness to their unspoken bond. Each passing day tightened the invisible thread between them, drawing them closer, no matter how hard they both tried to resist. For Damien, pride had always been his shield, but now it was slipping away. For Adaobi, survival had always been her focus, but now her heart was betraying her resolve. Fate, it seemed, was writing a dangerous new chapter in both their lives. Neither of them knew where it would lead, but they both felt it an undeniable force pulling them toward a future that promised both risk and revelation. And in that unsteady balance between fear and longing, the story of their destiny was only just beginning. The days that followed were filled with an invisible tension that neither Damien nor Adeobi could escape. Every corner of the mansion seemed charged with unspoken words. Every glance between them a conversation they dared not have. Adobe tried to drown herself in her duties, scrubbing floors with more force than necessary, folding linens with mechanical precision, and avoiding the places where she knew he would be. Yet somehow, no matter how careful she was, their paths continued to cross, as though fate itself was conspiring against her resolve. Damien, on his part, found himself torn between two worlds: the ruthless businessman who had conquered industries and built empires, and the vulnerable man who could no longer deny what his heart wanted. His pride urged him to retreat, to remind himself of the difference in their stations, but his soul refused to be silenced. Each night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, he thought of her laughter, her eyes, her quiet strength, and each thought pulled him deeper into the web he had once sworn never to enter again. One late afternoon, the mansion was unusually quiet. Most of the staff had gone out to run errands, leaving Adobe to finish up in the library. She dusted the shelves, humming softly to herself, until the sound of footsteps made her pause. Damien appeared at the doorway, his expression unreadable, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. She straightened quickly, clutching the duster in her hand like a shield. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said, his voice low but steady. "You're not disturbing me, sir," she replied, though her voice betrayed a nervous tremor. He stepped further in, closing the distance between them. For a long moment, he said nothing, only studied her with an intensity that made her heart pound. Then, almost in a whisper, he confessed, "I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. Every time I see you, I feel something I never thought I would feel again." Adobe's throat went dry. She wanted to remind him of the risks, of the impossibility of their situation, but her words caught in her chest. The truth was, she felt it too. Every glance, every unintentional brush of his hand, had awakened a longing she didn't want to admit. "Sir, please," she finally managed, her voice breaking. This can't happen. People will talk. They'll never understand." "Let them talk," Damien said firmly. "I've lived my entire life for the world's approval, hiding my weakness, pretending to be untouchable. But what good is all this wealth, all this power, if I cannot choose the one person who makes me feel alive?" His words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Adobe turned away, her hands trembling. The weight of his confession pressed against her chest, threatening to shatter the walls she had built around herself. She wanted to run, to escape, before things spiraled out of control, but her feet refused to move. Damien took another step closer, his voice softer now. "I don't want to own you. I don't want to control you. I want you to see me. Not the billionaire, not the master of this house. Just me, a man who has been broken for too long." Slowly, she turned back to face him. For the first time, she saw not the powerful figure everyone else bowed to, but a man stripped of his pride, standing bare in his vulnerability. The sight shook her. Against her will, she felt her heart opening, inch by inch, to the dangerous possibility of something more. That evening, when she returned to her quarters, Adobe sat in silence for a long time. Her mind replayed every word, every look, every moment. She knew her life was at a crossroads. If she gave in, there was no turning back. She could lose everything: her job, her dignity, even her future. But deep inside, another voice whispered that perhaps she could gain more than she had ever dreamed of. Damien, in his wing, paced the floor of his bedroom like a restless lion. For once in his life, he had no strategy, no plan. All he had was a heart that refused to obey logic. He thought of the empire he had built, the enemies he had defeated, the deals he had secured. None of it mattered now. Only one thing consumed his thoughts: Adeobi. The mansion seemed smaller as the days passed, too small to contain the fire building between them. Every encounter, every exchange of glances, pulled them closer to the edge of a decision that could not be undone. And though fear lingered like a shadow, neither could deny the truth anymore. Their lives were no longer their own. Fate had intertwined them in ways neither wealth nor caution could unravel. The dangerous new chapter had begun in earnest, and whether it ended in ruin or redemption, neither of them could escape what destiny had already written. Days turned into weeks. and with each passing moment, the air in the mansion grew heavier, thick with the weight of secrets and longing. Adalby tried to maintain her distance, burying herself in her duties with a discipline that bordered on obsession. But Damien's presence was everywhere. His voice echoed in her mind. His eyes haunted her dreams, and his nearness stirred emotions she had never dared to feel before. One evening, a grand dinner was arranged in the mansion. Business partners, politicians, and family acquaintances filled the hall with laughter, wine, and expensive perfume. Adalby moved silently among them, serving drinks and ensuring everything was in order. She tried to be invisible, but Damien's gaze found her repeatedly across the room. Each time their eyes met, a current surged between them, so strong she almost dropped the tray in her hands. Midway through the evening, Damien excused himself from the crowd and stepped into the corridor. Adalby, unaware he had left, soon followed with a jug of wine, heading toward the kitchen. Their paths collided just beyond the grand staircase, and she nearly gasped when she saw him waiting there in the shadows. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered quickly, glancing around. "If anyone sees us, no one will." He cut in, his tone low but intense. "Do you know how hard it is to stand in a room full of people and pretend I don't see you? Pretend I don't feel this pull every second of the day?" Her heart pounded. "Sir, please, you'll ruin everything." "Maybe everything needs to be ruined," he replied bitterly. "What's the point of building a world I can't share with the one person who matters?" Adalby swallowed hard, torn between fear and the ache in her chest. She wanted to tell him to stop, to let go before things went too far, but the words refused to leave her lips. Instead, silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. At last, she whispered, "I'm scared." Damien softened instantly, his hand hovering but not touching her. "So am I," he admitted. "But sometimes fear is the only proof that what we're stepping into is real." Before she could respond, voices echoed down the hall, forcing them apart. Adalby darted away, clutching the jug tightly, while Damien straightened his suit and rejoined his guests, his heart still pounding from the stolen moment. That night, Adalby lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling. The image of him standing in the shadows replayed in her mind, over and over. She had never felt so vulnerable, yet so alive. For the first time in her life, someone powerful, someone who could have the world at his feet, looked at her as though she was the only thing that mattered. The thought terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Meanwhile, Damien dismissed his guests earlier than usual. Alone in his room, he poured himself a glass of scotch and sat in silence, staring into the amber liquid. His mind warred with itself. Logic told him to end it, to let her go before they both drowned in scandal. But his heart, stubborn and restless, refused to obey. He had tasted something he could no longer deny, and the thought of losing it made him feel emptier than all the years of loneliness combined. The following days only intensified their unspoken connection. Every time their paths crossed, they exchanged brief glances that lingered too long, words that carried double meanings, silences that screamed louder than confessions. The mansion became a stage for a dangerous dance, and every step drew them closer to the edge. One rainy evening, the power went out in the mansion. The storm had knocked down several lines, plunging the house into darkness. Adalby lit candles in the hall, her hands trembling as the thunder roared outside. Damien appeared at the far end of the corridor, holding a lantern. The flickering light illuminated his face, casting shadows that made him look both mysterious and vulnerable. Their eyes met, and in that instant the storm outside seemed to mirror the storm within them. Without a word, he walked toward her, each step deliberate, each step breaking down the walls she had tried to build. When he reached her, he stopped only inches away, the scent of his cologne mingling with the faint smoke of the candle. "You can't keep running from this," he said softly, his eyes locked onto hers. "I'm not running," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm trying to survive." His hand finally bridged the distance, brushing against hers in a touch so gentle it sent shivers down her spine. "Then let's survive together," he said. Adalby's breath caught. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, the storm outside fading into silence. Her heart screamed at her to let go, to fall, to take the risk. And though fear still clung to her like a shadow, something deeper stirred a belief that maybe, just maybe, destiny had chosen this path for them. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring: scandal, betrayal, or redemption, but in that fragile moment lit by candlelight, they chose to surrender. And with that choice, their dangerous new chapter truly began.